Imagine the date is April or May 2026. For the past month, the Middle East has been at war. American and Israeli warplanes have struck Iranian nuclear sites, missile bases, and military factories. Iron Dome batteries in Israel are running dangerously low on interceptors. Some of the Gulf's desalination plants, the very source of drinking water for millions, have been struck by missiles. Iran blames Israel, and Israel blames the Iranians. Oil tankers are stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. Then, in the middle of this exhausted battlefield, an announcement comes from Tehran. In a quiet statement, we have built a set of nuclear bombs. Let us talk. Today, I want to walk you through what happens next. What is the state of the Middle East impasse? Why is the gap between the US 15-point plan and Iran's demands unbridgeable? What is Iran's real calculation in making such a declaration? And, most critically, does the world respond with more war, more sanctions, or a grudging acceptance, much like it did with North Korea? Let us begin. To understand the nuclear announcement, we have to first understand the battlefield we are standing on. By late March 2026, the US-Israel campaign is no longer a surgical strike. It has been a month-long war. First, the military exhaustion. Israel has struck most of the known nuclear facilities, Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. But in doing so, it has expended thousands of precision-guided munitions. Its air defense interceptors, resupplied by the United States, are now at critically low levels. The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE have seen their own Patriot and TOD batteries depleted while defending against drone and missile attacks from Yemen and Iraq. Second, the infrastructure is hostage. Some of the Gulf's desalination plants, which supply 90% of the drinking water in cities, have been struck. So, are oil loading terminals. One more wave of heavy bombing could push these facilities beyond repair. That means no drinking water, no oil exports, and a global energy shock that would make 1973 look like a minor disruption. Third, the diplomatic dead end. The United States has laid out what officials call the 15-point plan, a comprehensive demand that Iran dismantle its nuclear program beyond any threshold, end its ballistic missile development, and cease support for Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. In exchange, Iran would receive phased sanctions relief and a promise of non-aggression. Iran's response? Publicly, Tehran calls the 15-point plan a surrender document. Privately, its demands are the mirror image: immediate removal of all oil and financial sanctions, a formal U.S. apology for withdrawing from the JCPOA, a security guarantee that the U.S. will never again support regime change, and recognition of Iran as a regional power with a right to a nuclear deterrent. These two positions are not just far apart, they are mutually exclusive. One side demands that Iran become a non-nuclear, militarily constrained state. The other demands that the United States accept a nuclear-armed Iran as a permanent fact. And right now, neither side can impose its will by force. That is the impasse before the nuclear bomb is announced. So why would Iran choose this moment, exhausted, bombed, but still standing, to declare that it already possesses a set of nuclear weapons? Reason 1, to flip the military logic. As long as Iran's nuclear program is latent or threshold, the US and Israel feel they have a window to destroy it. Once a nuclear bomb is declared, that window slams shut. Any future attack now carries the risk that a nuclear warhead will be used in retaliation. Iran is betting that the United States and Israel will not gamble Tel Aviv or a carrier strike group against an uncertain chance of total disarmament. Reason 2, to force a shift from prevention to containment. Every strategy document ever written in Washington about Iran has the same goal: to prevent a nuclear Iran. But prevention is a pre-weapon concept. Once the weapon exists, the goal automatically becomes containment. Iran wants to make that conceptual switch happen overnight, on its terms, while its conventional retaliatory capabilities remain intact. Reason 3, to exploit US-Israel differences. During a month of war, Israel has taken the lead in strikes. But American domestic support for a prolonged war is fragile. By declaring a bomb, Iran offers the US a way out: stop the bombing, accept a nuclear Iran, and pivot to diplomacy. For an American administration facing election pressures and a global energy crisis, that off-ramp becomes very tempting. Reason 4, to preempt a decapitation strike. Intelligence agencies have long warned that if Iran were close to a bomb, Israel might attempt a final, all-out strike using bunker busters and special forces. By announcing after the strikes have already occurred, and after defensive stocks are low, Iran is saying, "You already tried to stop us. You failed. Do not try again." It is a strategic move to lock in a new reality. Iran is a nuclear power, with the US and Israel forced to deal with it rather than try to destroy it. Now, we must talk about the international legal architecture, or what is left of it. Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Under the NPT, a non-nuclear state is forbidden from acquiring nuclear weapons. If Iran announces it has bombs, it is in flagrant violation. But watch what happens next. Almost immediately, Iran's government will announce that it is withdrawing from the NPT, citing extraordinary events, namely, a month-long war by two nuclear-armed states, the US and Israel, against its facilities. Legally, the NPT allows withdrawal. Practically, Iran will argue that the treaty has already failed because the nuclear halves never fulfilled their disarmament obligations and because the US treated the JCPOA, a multilateral agreement, as optional. Then comes the Security Council. Existing UN sanctions, the ones snapped back in late 2025, are still technically in force. But would the Security Council pass a new resolution condemning Iran's bomb and imposing even more draconian measures? Almost certainly not. Russia has already called the snapback unlawful. China has repeatedly said that the US withdrawal from the JCPOA is the root cause of the crisis. In the context of a war started by US-Israel strikes, Moscow and Beijing would veto any new sanctions resolution. They will argue that the Council cannot punish Iran for defending itself after its facilities were bombed. This leaves the United States in a strange position. It will denounce Iran's bomb, reimpose its own unilateral sanctions, and try to build a coalition to enforce them. But the legitimacy of that effort will be hollow. As one diplomat put it to me recently, you cannot enforce a nuclear taboo when you have walked away from every nuclear agreement you signed and when you are actively bombing the very facilities you claim you want to inspect. So the NPT is dealt a severe blow. The Security Council is paralyzed. And the world is left with a nuclear Iran and no legal framework to reverse it. At this point, many in the audience will be thinking, but won't Israel or the US attack anyway? Isn't a nuclear Iran an existential threat? Let us look at the one clear precedent we have, North Korea. For more than a decade, North Korea has tested nuclear devices, threatened its neighbors, and even traded rhetoric about striking the US mainland. And yet, despite multiple crises, there was never a preventive American or Israeli strike on North Korea's nuclear facilities. Why? First, because deterrence works, even with unstable regimes. Having a single nuclear bomb changes the calculation entirely. North Korea's nuclear tests did not invite war, they created a red line that prevented war. Second, because geography is not decisive. Some argue that Iran is different because it is closer to Israel and has proxies. But that proximity actually strengthens deterrence. Iran can already inflict massive damage on Israel and the Gulf using conventional missiles and drones. Adding a nuclear weapon makes that threat existential. It does not make Israel more likely to attack, it makes Israel less likely to risk a conventional campaign that might trigger a nuclear response. Third, because the window for a successful preventive war closes once a weapon exists. Before a test, military planners can argue that a strike might destroy the program. After a test, that argument collapses. You are no longer trying to prevent a bomb, you are trying to disarm a nuclear state, something no country has ever attempted against a determined adversary without triggering a catastrophic war. So, in our scenario, after Iran announces it has a set of bombs, the probability of a large-scale Israeli-US attack does not increase. It drops to near zero. The conversation shifts from when will we strike? To how do we deter Iran from using what it has? That does not mean there will be no military action at all. There may be covert operations, cyber attacks, or targeted killings. But another full-scale bombing campaign aimed at regime change or complete nuclear disarmament? That option is effectively off the table. If war becomes less likely, the primary weapon becomes economic pressure. The United States and its European allies will maintain and even tighten sanctions. They will try to enforce a naval blockade to stop Iranian oil exports. They will threaten secondary sanctions on any company or country doing business with Tehran. But here is the critical shift. In 2026, the global economy is not the same as it was in 2012 or 2018. The BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, plus new members such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, has been quietly building an alternative financial infrastructure, the Digital M-Bridge project. Currently, Iran wants all oil passing through the straits to be denominated in yuan. There are bilateral currency swap agreements that bypass the dollar. China and India have continued to buy Iranian oil throughout the war, settling payments in yuan. After Iran announces its bomb, we will see this parallel system accelerate. Russia and China will publicly argue that US sanctions are illegal because they were reimposed after the US itself violated the JCPOA. They will facilitate Iranian oil exports, provide banking channels, and even offer technical assistance to help Iran maintain its energy sector under sanctions. For Iran, this is a lifeline. It will not entirely escape sanctions, its economy will remain damaged, and its access to Western technology will be restricted. But it will no longer face the total economic strangulation that was possible in 2012. The BRICS alternative means that Iran can survive, trade, and gradually integrate into a non-Western economic bloc. This is perhaps the deepest geopolitical consequence of the scenario. A nuclear Iran, backed by a BRICS-led sanctions-proofing system, would mark the end of the era when Washington could unilaterally decide which countries get to participate in the global economy. So where do we land? Will there be future wars? I believe the answer is, no large-scale US-Israel war of aggression against Iran, but a protracted, Cold War-style conflict. We will see a nuclear standoff. Israel will maintain its undeclared nuclear arsenal. Iran will have its declared arsenal. Neither will use them, but both will engage in constant brinkmanship. Proxy conflict continues. Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Shia militias will continue to challenge US and Israeli interests. But those conflicts will be carefully managed to avoid triggering a direct Iranian-Israeli nuclear exchange. A new arms race, Saudi Arabia will announce that it will pursue its own nuclear capability, either by purchasing from Pakistan or by developing its own. The region will become a nuclear tinderbox. Diplomatic coexistence, paradoxically, the very danger of nuclear war will create pressure for de-escalation. Just as the US and Soviet Union found ways to talk during the Cold War, the US and Iran will establish direct channels, de-confliction mechanisms, and perhaps even a limited understanding, a no first-use pledge or a crisis hotline. The 15-point plan will be dead. Iran's demands for recognition as a nuclear power will not be accepted formally, but they will be accepted in practice. Let me leave you with this thought. For decades, the United States and Israel have operated on the assumption that if Iran ever got close to a nuclear weapon, military force could stop it. That assumption was always risky. In our scenario, it is now overtaken by events. When Iran announces it has a set of nuclear bombs, it is not asking for permission. It is announcing a new reality. The war that preceded it exhausted the attackers. The NPT and the Security Council are paralyzed. The North Korean precedent shows that a nuclear state, once established, is rarely attacked. And a BRICS-led economic alternative means Iran can survive sanctions long enough to make its nuclear status permanent. This does not mean the Middle East becomes peaceful. It means the conflict enters a new phase, one defined not by attempts to disarm Iran, but by the grim, tense, and paradoxically stabilizing logic of nuclear deterrence. The question is no longer can we stop Iran from getting the bomb? It is can we prevent a nuclear arms race in the Middle East? And can we build a diplomatic framework to manage a nuclear Iran, before the next war begins? Those are the questions we will be grappling with for the next decade. They are the legacy of the choices made today. Thank you.